Hello, so my name is Miranda, or Miranda, depending how you want to pronounce it, and I'm working in the Azores for Futurismo, so we are a whale watching company, and I'm actually working as a biologist and a guide at the same time, so I have this kind of double role. So it's really interesting the way that we are doing the research in this company. So we actually have the guides who are biologists. We don't call ourselves naturalists, we call ourselves biologists. For example, I have a master's in marine science. And we are guiding the tours and collecting data, doing research as well. So it's going to be a really kind of a general overview. I know there's not much time. I won't go into the nitty-gritty about the research. I know a lot of you are not from a scientific background, so it's really just an overview to show how this kind of research can be useful. So, yep. So first of all, probably a lot of you don't know where the Azores are located. So we are situated almost in the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Portugal. So there are 9 islands shown by the black marks. So 9 volcanic islands, it's an archipelago. And we are situated on the meeting points of 3 tectonic plates. So it's a very volcanically active region. Actually, the islands are basically the tips of volcanoes rising out of the ocean. And you can see that we are surrounded by this kind of very deep ocean. A lot of water around us, almost 1 million square kilometers of ocean. So it's a hot spot for cetacean life, for marine life in general, but especially cetaceans. So these are all the species that have been registered in the waters of the Azores. 27 different cetaceans, which is around a third of all the world's species. So we can see a huge diversity around the Azores. If we look at the conservation status according to the IUCN Red List, you can see that most of them are data deficient, so we don't know the population status, which is the case with a lot of areas around the world. A lot of cetaceans, especially when it comes to beaked whales. In the Azores we can see 6 different species of beaked whales. And you can also see, like is the case in other places as well, we have a lot of them that are endangered to some point. So it just highlights the importance, the need to study these animals, as you all know already. I'm sure I don't need to explain that. So where we are working, so I showed on the previous map there are 9 islands, and we are working off São Miguel Island. Futurismo is operating from São Miguel, although we're also starting off Pico Island. We are starting from the north coast as well, but right now we have data from the south coast where we operate from. So we have our data points from our last years of sightings, encounters with cetaceans, whales and dolphins. And you can see that we cover a really large area. And most of our sightings are in really deep water. So we have the box plot on the right side. You can see the thicker line shows the average water depth of our encounters between 1,000 and 1,500 meters deep. If we look from another viewpoint, so we can see São Miguel Island up on the top in the slightly darker red, and we are working mostly in this kind of basin south of the island. And this basin is an important area of some local upwelling, so it's a really productive region. This is where we have most of our encounters. Again, you can see it's in very, very deep waters. So a little bit of background about the company. So Futurismo started operating in 1993, first by sailboat, actually doing charter tours between the islands. In 1995, we actually started going out by a Zodiac boat, and in 1998 is when the data collection began. First of all, some observations from land, so we have land-based data collection, and then we started in 2006 with basically recording our sightings during the tours, or at the end of the tours, very basic data collection, which probably a lot of companies do, basically at the end of the day recording what species you saw. So you can start to do some basic statistics with that. In May 2008, we started more intensive data collection during the tour, so actual encounter data. So by now we already have around a 9-year data set. So we have both the land-based and the boat-based data. So the land-based data is collected by what we call vigias, so it's a Portuguese word, it's basically lookouts. It's an old technique from the whaling days, so people are sitting on the cliff tops of the island with binoculars. It's a really efficient technique, it works well for the Azores. So they're finding pretty much all the animals that we see during the tours. So you can see some of the basic data that they are recording. So of course the date, the time that they see the animals, which species they see. They're actually really, really good at what they do. For example, this lookout, I believe he's working with us since 2008, so he can often tell which species he's observing from the kind of behavior, from the shape of the blow. He's recording some other things as well. When we get to the boats, or when we get to the animals on the boats, we have biologists like myself recording more specific information so we can get more specifics on the area, so the exact GPS coordinates, more specifics on the species if it wasn't already known by the lookouts, the group structure, for example, number of adults, juveniles, calves, And also we collect the ID photos during the tours as well for photo ID studies. So we've got a lot of different types of information that we are just collecting as a company with the guides that are working on board and the lookouts on land as well. So what we can do with this data, so just some examples, we can look at the distribution of the species, the temporal distribution and spatial as well, so we can look at the occurrence of the individuals and groups, for example, and with the photo ID studies, so of course we can look at the populations, number of individuals, longevity, how often they have calves, so we can look at a lot of different things, population dynamics, even migration of individuals by comparing photographs over a larger area, like you saw with Happy Whale, for example. Well, we have some of our guides that are actually doing research for a university. So we have one of our guides doing a PhD, and she's looking at linking the distribution of the animals to environmental factors, sea surface temperature, chlorophyll, for example. And it's also really interesting with our lookout data from land, we can look at the effects of the boats. So it's really important that we are monitoring our activity as well. So we can do these kind of behavioral studies as well to see what is happening when boats are present versus when they are not present with the animals. So when we put together all of our data, this is just looking at the data from the boats, not from land. So we have, I didn't include this year, well, no, I included up to May. So we have from May till 2008 up till May and the current year. So we're missing a few species from June. But you can see that we can see a lot of different species every year. Some of them are not turning up every year, so some of them are, of course, more rare than others. But just from this opportunistic data collection on board during tours, we have a lot of different sightings. So to summarize, we have 20 different species. We didn't distinguish between short-finned and long-finned pilot whales, very difficult. Also, some of the beaked whales could not be identified, but even so, we have 20 different species and more than 10,000 different encounters that we've recorded on board. So what can we do with this information? So I'm just going to give just a quick summary of some of the different things that we can do. So for example, with temporal distribution, so we can look at the occurrence of species over time. So we can look at monthly occurrence, for example, getting the average of all years. We look at the average daily frequency. We've got 4 different examples here. We've got our resident sperm whales that are living year-round in the Azores and 3 of the migratory baleen whales. So you can see the different distributions, and we can start to understand a little bit more about when these animals are occurring in the Azores. So we know that the sperm whales are resident, but we can see that they are a lot more common in the summertime than they are in the wintertime. Then we have different seasons for the different baleen whales. So the blue whales, they have a really limited season. We see them for a few short months of the year. The sei whales, for example, have a much broader season. They tend to stay more throughout the summertime. And the humpback whale actually has 2 peaks. It's not very clear in this data here, but when we compare our data with others from the Azores, we can see that they have 2 peaks. So we see both the northbound and the southbound migrating humpback whales. Sorry, let's get some water. Something else that we can look at is the distribution over a larger timescale as well. So we've got a really interesting example from fin whales here. So we've noticed that in recent years we've been encountering more fin whales than in earlier years that we were collecting data. So I didn't include 2008 nor the current year because we don't have a complete year worth of data. But for example, this year we've already encountered fin whales on 74 days. So we're already right up there with the previous years. So you might think, well, maybe it's because of the effort, maybe you're going out more often. If we look at how many days that we're going out, you can see it hasn't actually increased much over the last years. Actually, since we've been collecting data, Futurismo has been operating all year, so in the winter as well in the summer, and usually we are more limited actually by the weather. So we are going out basically every day that we can. So when we factor in this kind of effort as a measure of the number of days that we're going out, you can see that the percentage of days that we encounter fin whales, it's still a lot more in recent years than in earlier years. There's still a lot more that we can do with this. We need to look more into detail if this is actually a trend or not. We can look at other forms of effort as well, but well, it's a start. And we can see similar things with some other species as well. So that was just one example. So I was saying before that we have one of our guides doing a PhD, so she's looking at the distribution of the 3 large baleen whales, so blue whales, fin whales and sei whales. She's mapping out the distribution and she's seeing how that relates to different factors, so biotic factors and abiotic factors as well. So she's looking at the depth, the slope, the distance to shore, for example, and it might be difficult to see now. We have some box plots on the right side. So the first one is for the blue whales, who tend to be further offshore and deeper and colder waters. Then we have the fin whales and then the sei whales. So she noticed that the animals or the different species are using the area in different ways. We can see this in a different way as well. So we have the dark blue at the top on the maps, that is the island, São Miguel Island, and you can see for the 3 different species they're using the area kind of in a different way. So this is basically a preliminary study that she's been doing. She'll be looking into more detail about what's going on and also linking to, for example, chlorophyll, and then we can start to predict what may be driving factors to attracting these animals to the region, and even why we see more of certain species in certain years as well. So what I'm looking more into is photo ID. So we are doing photo ID for a lot of different species in the Azores. I will just give examples of 3 different species, but we're also doing, for example, we have a master student who's studying the Risso's dolphins, we're doing the bottlenose dolphins, pilot whales, basically a lot of different species, but these are the examples that I will very quickly cover, short on time. So sperm whales are resident in the Azores, and we have been intensively taking photographs since 2010, basically when I arrived to the company. We do have a few older photos as well, but basically in 2010 we started systematically taking ID photographs during the tours. So you can see sperm whales can be identified from the fluke, from the trailing edge, and just from São Miguel Island, not including some others that we have from other parts of the Azores. We have 382 individuals, and you can see the majority of them are females and immatures. We can tell the difference based on size and the size of the head, with the males being much larger. So only 34 of the individuals in our catalogue are adult males, and 32 of these have been seen only once of São Miguel, never seen again. One of them was encountered 2 different days and then never seen again of São Miguel. We only have one unusual case of a male who we call Mr. Liable, who up until last month was seen on 90 different days since 2006. The last days he's been resighted, so he's been kind of staying around São Miguel Island the last years. We don't know why. It's very unusual for the males that are not normally staying around the Azores. So again, we have a master student who's actually doing a project on this particular individual. We share the photographs with other regions as well. So within the Azores, we have 6 matches of our 34 males. 6 have been seen in what we call the central group of the Azores, Pico and Fayal mostly. And one of these has been seen in Norway. So Norway, Pico Island, and São Miguel as well. When we look at the females, so like I said, we have a lot more females and immature individuals who cannot yet be distinguished what sex they are. And 35% of them have been resighted off São Miguel. Many of them are seen on multiple days. And also we have more than 50% of these have been seen off the central group of the Azores, so we know that there's a lot of movements within the Azores around the islands, and 17 of our individuals have been seen off the Canary Islands, as well as 1 off Madeira, actually in all 3 locations, Madeira, the Canary Islands, and Azores, São Miguel. If we put this on a map, and I can't take credit for this, so we have a name up here, Lisa Steiner. She's been studying the whales since I believe 1986. So she's basically the sperm whale guru in the Azores. Everyone sends photographs to her, not just from the Azores, but also these other places. And she has found all of these matches. So we have 7 matches to Norway. One was the one that we sighted in São Miguel, who we call Magne. We have 18 matches to the Canary Islands, one of which was seen only off Pico Island. All the other 17 were seen in São Miguel and the Canary Islands. And one was seen in those 3 locations of Micronesia. Lisa Steiner has been trying to match to other regions as well, so you can see the red dotted lines with the question marks. It's quite possible that we have matches to Cape Verde as well, but their catalogue size is really small, so we need more time and effort to see if there are matches also to Cape Verde. It's possible that they could cross the Atlantic as well, but while the catalogue from the Caribbean is actually quite a large one, and there are no matches, so probably they're just staying within that region. So this helps us to understand more about the movements of these whales. We can also look at other things with photo ID, so the association between individuals, so group structure, who was seen with who, and eventually maybe who is related with who, although you probably need DNA to see that. But we have 357 encounters in which we saw more than one individual, often multiple individuals. The females and the juveniles, they form groups, family groups. So the 2 individuals we've seen together the most times are those 2 on the top, and we see others together with these as well. It's our most encountered group. And we have another example who I believe are mother and calf, Alsemic and Peregrine. We've seen Peregrine since being a calf. We could identify this one from dorsal marks before he started fluking. And we believe that it's a mother and calf pair. We've seen them all the time together, but for that we would need DNA to confirm. Going to our other examples, so we have the humpback whales, so you know from Happy Whale how we ID the humpback whales. So we do have matches between São Miguel and other regions as well. You can see our catalogue is really, really small, so we have only 39 individuals. Humpbacks are really not that common for the Azores, but we do have quite a few matches. So we have a resighting in São Miguel, which was a whale that was seen twice in Iceland as well. We have a match to the central group of the Azores again, also Cape Verde and Norway, for example. So again, putting this on a map. So the first match that we found was a whale that was seen in 2010 off São Miguel Island. We received news that this one had been seen in 2002 off Cape Verde, and in Norway 10 years later. So this is not in one migratory period, of course. But this is the first time for the North Atlantic that a loop migration was found as this whale returned back to the breeding grounds in Cape Verde. So it did a whole loop for the Northeast Atlantic. At least this was the first time that such a match was found. This is a population that we know very little about. And something else we could find out from this, we had seen this whale in 2010 with a calf, and it was seen again with a calf 4 years later. So then we can see, for example, the intercalf interval. Again, I can't take credit for this work, so we are contributing our photographs to the North Atlantic Humpback whale catalogue, and these are all the matches that they have found for the Northeast Atlantic. So 10 matches between the Azores and Cape Verde, so Cape Verde is where they're breeding, 8 matches to Norway or Iceland, and 4 of these have now been seen in all 3 locations. Again, we have the other side of the Atlantic. Of course, they have their own population, their own migratory route. It's possible there is some crossover in between. Actually, 5 months ago, they started a whale tagging study up in Norway. They tagged humpback whales that migrated south, actually past the Azores, west of the Azores, down to the Caribbean. And they have started their way back up to the north. One of them is still tracking. Just yesterday it was just seen north of the Azores, so it kind of actually crossed to the other side of the North Atlantic. So there's still a lot that we don't know about the migratory routes of these animals. There's still a lot that we can learn. Our final example of photo ID is of blue whales. You can see they can be identified from the pattern of spots on the body. We have 125 individuals in our catalogue, not counting the ones from this year. We haven't had a chance to go through them yet. Our baleen whale season is still going right now. But we do have some matches, some whales that have returned to São Miguel. We have an example here. 5 of our individuals have been rematched to São Miguel Island, so we found those matches ourselves. And then we contribute the photographs again to a larger catalogue, so the Northeast Atlantic catalogue, which is managed by Richard Sears. So again, I can't take the credit for this, but he's found other matches as well. So he's matched one of our photographs from São Miguel to Iceland, which brings it up to 3 matches total. So we have fewer matches in for the humpback whales, but still we're starting to put together the pieces of the puzzle. And we also received the exciting news that he had matched that whale to Mauritania. So for many years, even nowadays, we still don't know where the blue whales go to mate. We haven't discovered a breeding ground for them, so this may be the first clue. So it was really exciting news. We also received exciting news. This was not one of our photographs, but one of the other companies operating in Pico Island photographed a whale in 2014 that had been seen in 1984 in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. So it did this unusual crossing, and then the next year, 2015, it went back to the Gulf of St. Lawrence. So who knows what's going on there. So you can see obviously there are a lot of benefits to this kind of research on whale watching platforms, and especially the way that we are doing it in Futurismo, I believe it's very beneficial. So first of all, it's relatively inexpensive. Of course, the boats are going out anyway with the tourists, and it's very little equipment involved. So I'm just going out with the camera, some data sheets. We have the GPS on board, which has to be on board anyway, and we have the binoculars for the lookout on land, and some data sheets as well. And of course we have a lot more effort than other types of research, which is normally quite sporadic, so you normally have field seasons, and it's not very consistent when you're another type of researcher. So we are out there with a lot of boats, we have a lot of effort, and we have the constant shore-based data collection as well. And Futurismo is the only company, the only entity in the Azores that is going out all years. All of the other whale watching companies, even they close their doors in the winter time. So we have the opportunity to collect a lot of data. And I believe it's very educational for the public, so they can see what we are doing. We are explaining the research that we're doing during the tour. Quite often during the tour afterwards we show the photographs, and we can even already say exactly which whale was seen. Like Tori was saying, it's really interesting. They feel like it's their whale. They can contribute photographs as well if the biologist missed it, for example. And also we get the information, the scientific information, the latest news out to them during the tours, which I feel like quite often in the scientific community, the results are a little bit kind of kept to themselves and it doesn't get out to the public. And it's really important for conservation that the general public understands what's going on. And I think it's also good to do this kind of research because, well, it provides full-time work for biologists like myself, so we can be out there studying the animals, going out there full-time and collecting data and having this full-time work, and also for students, for example. So we do have students doing research projects coming on board with us. Getting to the end, so up till now we have attended, or our research results have been presented at 12 different scientific conferences. For example, the European Cetacean Society, Society for Marine Mammalogy, so 12 different conferences, mostly posters at this stage, scientific posters. We've had 19 of them, and we've had 3 theses that have been completed with our data from the company, and we have currently, I believe, 3 master students plus the PhD student as well. That are going to contribute more. And we have 1 scientific or 1 peer-reviewed publication using an encounter of a very rare beaked whale species that we know really little about. This is actually the first time that a photograph of a calf of this species was taken by one of our biologists, so it's really interesting. There are other types of opportunistic plastic platforms as well, so our thesis, our doctorate student, Laura, she has started this program 6 months ago called Sail and Whale. So she's actually educating sailors also that are crossing the large ocean basins especially to collect some basic sighting information and photographs if they can on cetaceans. So it's proven to be really successful the last month. She already has sightings, I believe, of 12 different species, mostly across the North Atlantic, but well, in other places as well. And so the benefits are basically the same as whale watching platforms, except that they are often going out to the high sea, even to the places where the whale watching boats don't go. So they have this kind of opportunity to collect information on sightings in other places where no one else goes, basically. So we have the information here. If anyone wants to come and speak with me afterwards, I can put you in contact with Laura, who is running this project. So that's it. Thank you very much. I hope it didn't take too long.